In the wake of the Great Recession, Americans had a wide variety of small car options. While often a bit Spartan inside and underpowered, these subcompact hatchbacks and sedans offered affordability, practicality, and great fuel economy in a lightweight, nimble package. Even if you were a car enthusiast, models like the Ford Fiesta ST, Fiat 500 Abarth, and even the Honda Fit were known for being fun to drive without breaking the bank. But now, in 2024, all but two mass-market subcompact cars remain on the North American market, and both of those are set to be cancelled in the near future. So, what happened? Were they too small for us pickup truck-loving Americans? Are car makers deliberately ignoring the lower end of the market? Or did the crossover SUV ruin everything again? In this video, I try to answer these questions and explore the death of the subcompact car. Before we get to the state of today's market, I'll briefly go over the history of the subcompact in the United States. While there were small cars sold in America beforehand, the subcompact segment really emerged in the early 1970s. The efforts from Detroit's Big Three, the Ford Pinto and Chevrolet Vega, don't exactly have the best reputation. The Pinto would explode from a simple rear-end impact due to cynical cost-cutting, and the Vega was known for being unreliable and partially rotten before it left the showroom floor. However, in the wake of the 1974 oil crisis that made American land yachts far more expensive to run, the Pinto and Vega still sold well. Foreign-made subcompact cars, especially from Japan, really took the market by storm. Cars like the Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla proved to be wildly popular due to their reliability, affordability, and fantastic fuel economy. Options expanded further in the 1980s, with manufacturers aiming to meet the new corporate average fuel economy targets. The segment was important enough to justify some manufacturers selling multiple subcompacts, with Chevrolet selling the Sprint, Chevette, and Spectrum all at once. None of them were actually designed by Chevrolet, but still, the point stands. However, by the 1990s, the subcompact car had gotten a poor reputation for feeling especially cheap and unrefined to drive. They were seen as penalty boxes for those who couldn't spend more money on a car, and were often a last resort purchase. The Geo Metro, while it has since gained a cult following, is a great example of this. It was a rebadged Suzuki, sold without much effort by General Motors as the cheapest possible mode of transport. However, even despite its reputation for terrible materials, poor safety, and strained performance, the Metro cost practically nothing to own due to its exceptional fuel economy and minuscule entry price. It just wasn't a car that you wanted to buy. Until the late 2000s, the American subcompact car market consisted of cars that most people bought out of necessity and not desire. This was reflected in the segment's sales numbers, which added up to around 230,000 units in 2001. That doesn't sound too bad, until you realize that Ford sold nearly twice as many Explorers that same year. And that's just one vehicle. Let's be honest here. Nobody walked into a Chevy dealer wanting to drive off in an Aveo. However, when the 2008 financial crisis rolled around and gas prices went through the roof, the segment began to flourish in terms of popularity and variety. The controversial Cash for Clunkers scheme likely also helped to boost the sales of economical subcompact cars. you still had several options that were only concerned with being cheap and nothing else. Looking at you, base model Nissan Versa. But a few automakers decided to bring over offerings that were competitive in Europe's popular B segment. A few of the highlights included the Honda Fit, Ford Fiesta, and Mazda 2. Also around this time, Fiat was relaunched in America with the adorable new 500, and many hadn't yet sold out to making crossovers. In the early 2010s, Chevy replaced the Aveo with the significantly less terrible Sonic and Spark, and the Hyundai Accent and Kia Rio also got updates, even though they still weren't the best cars in the segment. However, during the early to mid-2010s, a new segment began to emerge: the subcompact crossover. While essentially just subcompact hatchbacks on stilts, these cars became immensely successful. Though customers apparently loved their marginally higher seating positions and trendy form factor, these crossovers are usually more expensive, less efficient, and worse handling than their hatchback counterparts. When comparing the 2024 Nissan Versa to the Nissan Kicks, for example, the top trim Versa is still $650 less than a base Kicks, and the base Versa with a manual transmission is over $4,500 less than the Kicks. When they're both equipped with the soul-sucking CVT transmission, the Versa gets 40 miles per gallon highway compared to the Kicks' 36, and both have the same engine. Even so, Nissan sold over 50,000 Kicks in 2023, while only managing to shift around 20,000 Versas. As a whole, the market share of subcompact crossovers ballooned from just 0.8% in 2012 to nearly 5% by 2019. That same year, subcompact cars only made up 2.7% of new car purchases in the US. As such, automakers began discontinuing subcompact cars left and right. The Ford Fiesta, Fiat 500, and Toyota Prius C died in 2019. The Toyota Yaris, Honda Fit, and Chevy Sonic died in 2020. The Hyundai Accent and Chevy Spark died in 2022, and the Kia Rio died in 2023. Today, only the Nissan Versa sedan and Mitsubishi Mirage remain, and both of those cars will be leaving the US market around 2025. In other words, the American subcompact car is dead. In Europe, where space is at a premium and consumers generally prefer smaller vehicles, the B segment, which is equivalent to the American subcompact class, still includes a decent amount of competent options. However, as crossovers and SUVs gain more popularity in the region, sales of A and B segment vehicles have taken a significant hit. By 2022, the two smallest vehicle classes only made up 15% of the vehicle sales in the EU, while SUVs made up nearly 50%. The even smaller A segment has been shrinking for years, and many of the less popular B segment models have already been discontinued. Perhaps most surprisingly, Ford of Europe announced that after nearly 50 years, the Fiesta was being discontinued, to focus on new electric crossovers. The Fiesta was still an incredibly popular model, even experiencing a months-long backlog of orders during the semiconductor shortage. So we have yet to see if this was just a bad business decision, or Ford getting ahead of market trends. Even still, its discontinuation doesn't bode well for the future of the segment in Europe. With the proliferation of electric vehicles, automakers no longer have to make less profitable small cars to meet their emissions targets, meaning they can simply print money with trendy crossovers that are objectively worse in many ways. If you want to hear me complain more about crossovers, I made a whole video about them. Anyway, regardless of your opinion on crossovers, the decreasing amount of options for those who just want an efficient, affordable, and practical small car is disturbing. With the average new car transaction price around $50,000 in the United States, while wages are relatively stagnant, buying a new car is becoming less and less attainable. This, in turn, puts more stress on the used market and increases prices for everyone. Regardless of whether or not you like small cars, I believe that a massive hole in the market is forming, and that's bad for everyone. My personal prediction is that eventually, in the era of electric vehicles, we will see the return of small cars. Efficiency is massively important for EVs, and crossovers are an inherently heavy and inefficient body type. Just giving things bigger batteries isn't really going to solve anything, especially as we reckon with the challenges of sourcing rare earth minerals. Or maybe I'm completely wrong, and everyone will be driving 4-ton electric behemoths until the sun explodes. I just know that that isn't a world I want to live in.